Chelsea could still add another forward. A lot may depend on the future of Nicolas Jackson. They're not so much bidding or calling Guehi their only target. They're trying to understand what is the actual valuation. So even if Alexander Isak stays, perhaps Dominic Calvert-Lewin is the kind of player that would be a good fit at Newcastle.
Hello, I'm Angelina Kelly and welcome to The Window, talkSPORT's daily video transfer update and your go-to guide for all of the biggest football moves. Coming up, we'll be chatting all things Chelsea, the latest on Marc Guehi, why John Duran is exiting Saudi Arabia, plus so much more. And joining me today is talkSPORT sports broadcaster and man in the know when it comes to transfers, Ben Jacobs. Ben, first up, let's talk Chelsea. They are reportedly adding Jamie Gittins and João Pedro to their long list of young forward players, which includes Liam Delap, who they already signed earlier in the window for £30 million. They have brought in midfielder Dario Usugo and defender Mamadou Sarr, but should fans be concerned about their transfer policy in general? Should they be looking at more defensive options? Are they already looking?
Another defender could come in for Chelsea. They need to resolve the future of a few first. For example, Trevor Chalobah. Axel Disasi is free to leave as well, and he's not part of the Club World Cup squad. And if Chelsea are to add, I sense that it'll be a more versatile kind of defender, particularly a centre-back, left-back, and that's why they have an interest in Joel Hatto. At Ajax, they might face competition from Arsenal and Liverpool as well. And I think part of the push for versatility in defence will be down to the fact that Renato Veiga could well leave as well. He wants to play regularly and at centre-back with a view to the 2026 World Cup and boosting his Portugal chances by doing that. And probably Chelsea's not the place for him to get those opportunities. So Hatto's a player that Chelsea have looked at for quite some time, and they might enter that race. There's been links in the past with Marc Guehi, but I'm not aware of that one advancing at this stage, and it will certainly be interesting to see what Crystal Palace's asking price is there. And then Chelsea could still add another forward as well. A lot may depend on the future of Nicolas Jackson. I don't feel like Chelsea are transfer listing or forcing Jackson out of the club in any way. But if the right offer came in and Chelsea thought that it was too strong to turn down, it might give them the opportunity to still add another attack-minded player. And Christopher Nkunku, don't forget, is expected to still depart. We know that Chelsea like Hugo Ekitike to name but one target. They've been offered Mohamed Kudus, but I think that Tottenham might be the club to watch there. So Chelsea is still going to be quite busy, but they're pleased to have got the bulk of their business, certainly in terms of the attackers, done in the early part of this window. And now Jamie Gittins is going to be finalised in the next 12 to 24 hours. There's no sort of urgency to dot the I's and cross the T's there because he can't be part of the Club World Cup squad because he already featured for Dortmund. And then you've got João Pedro, who's flying in for his medical, and that deal is expected to be completed before July the 3rd to allow him to be registered as part of Chelsea's Club World Cup squad.
So if they do add even more up front, is there a fear that all these forward attacking players will even get enough game time?
Well, I think Enzo Maresca will probably make it clear that his core squad is still likely 25, maybe 27, and that's in keeping with most of the big six teams. I think you join a club like Chelsea, there's always going to be competition, and some of these young players that are with Chelsea now are also going to be sent out on loan. Matis Amadou is expected to go to Strasbourg. You have Kendry Paez, who could also be loaned to Chelsea's sister club. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the young goalkeeper, Mike Penders. He could also be loaned to Strasbourg. So 3 are going to go to Strasbourg for sure. And then you have no doubt opportunities for some of Chelsea's other younger players like Amari Kellyman, who's returning from injury. He'll be going to a championship club. The ones I think Chelsea fans will have the most interest in are the pathways and minutes for players like Andre Santos and Esteval Willian. Esteval Willian's at Palmeiras at the moment, so we have to wait and see how quickly he can acclimatise, but Chelsea view him as part of their first team squad. With Andre Santos, he's just come back from an excellent loan at Strasbourg, where he got into double figures of goals in Ligue 1. And I asked Enzo Maresca, how do you sort of define him positionally? Is he more Romeo Lavia, Moises Caicedo? an Enzo Fernandez, or even an out-and-out 8. And Maresca said he's kind of an Enzo Fernandez. So I think Chelsea feel they've kind of got an either-or, an established player and then a younger, I wouldn't even say backup, but somebody that might have to be a bit more patient to break into the side. Good examples of that might be Enzo Fernandez or Andre Santos, Moises Caicedo or Dario Asugu. And that is what Chelsea want. A little bit of an age gap between two profiles that can push each other. Some of these profiles will stay, others will be loaned. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's that much concern within Chelsea about the fact they've overstocked, because once Enzo Maresca settles and has his Premier League squad, which is a lot smaller than the squad allowed here at the Club World Cup, the actual numbers will be relatively low. Now, that will mean, of course, there's one or two that either need to go out on loan or have to be sold. So it's probably more of a headache for Chelsea's recruitment team at the moment than it is necessarily for Enzo Maresca, because they've got to focus July and August on getting some players out the door as well. And there's quite a few like Raheem Sterling, Ben Chilwell, Disasi, who I mentioned, potentially Kiernan Dewsbury Hall, some suggestions that Noni Madueke might even be up for sale. Although, again, my understanding is, as with Jackson, Chelsea are not going to push Madueke out, but at the right offer, they might engage. So this isn't just about Chelsea and incomings, many of which have been done early. This is also about the recruitment team facilitating several outgoings to make sure that come that first Premier League game against Crystal Palace, Chelsea's squad size is not too big.
You mentioned Marc Guehi. There's been a lot of talk this weekend surrounding him and his future, which could be in Merseyside. Do you have the latest on this?
Yeah, the latest with Marc Guehi is that if Liverpool move, it will almost be the exception to the rule, because actually Richard Hughes, the sporting director, is looking at other defensive profiles who are in the age bracket of 18 to 22. So Jarro Quansah goes to Leverkusen, he's 22. Liverpool ideally wants somebody who's 22 or under. And as I said with Chelsea, keep an eye with Liverpool and Jorrel Hatto and similar profiles. And the reason for that is because you've got Virgil van Dijk, still Ibrahima Konate, even though there's a question mark over his long-term Liverpool future. So somebody coming in may not have those instant minutes. Then you have Marc Guehi, who's kind of the exception to the rule. Still not old at the age of 24, but he will want instant minutes with a view to ensuring that he's on the plane for Thomas Tuchel's England squad next summer. And if Liverpool with Guehi see value in that deal, they may move away from this 18 to 22-year-old kind of profile and say, okay, it's worth pushing forwards with Marc Guehi. But they're still in a kind of exploration phase. Now, naturally, in any window, things can move quickly. But right now, they're not so much bidding or calling Guehi their only target. They're trying to understand what is the actual valuation, because if Crystal Palace stick to 45 or 50 million, even though that's a reduction from the 65 and 70 million that they quoted to Newcastle last summer and Tottenham in January, and neither of those deals got done because of the kind of structure of the deal. So it would be a reduction at 45 to 50, but not low enough for Liverpool to really move. If it's significantly south of 45 million for a player into the last year of his contract, then Liverpool may consider it if there's value for money. But if not, they'll move on to other targets. So it's kind of a key few days or maybe weeks for Marc Guehi for Liverpool to basically understand, is he a genuine market opportunity? If he is, they are expected to enter that race. If he's not, they'll move back to that 18 to 22-year-old type bracket of profile. And that's where the likes of Jorrel Hatto and others, of course, could be ones to watch. And if you think about Liverpool historically, they were always kind of in that strategy for this defensive profile. They tried for Lenny Yoro. He wanted instant minutes. Again, Liverpool couldn't give them. Manchester United said that they could. He moved to Old Trafford. They tried for Levi Colwill. Chelsea, when they did, considered Colwill untouchable. But those two players are other examples of this 18 to 22-year-old young defender. And in the case of Colwill, centre-back, left-back. So there's a clear pattern to Liverpool's recruitment, even actually predating the arrival of Richard Hughes. And now we have to understand how fast Liverpool want to move, and if they want to delay a little bit to determine what's Konate going to do. Could he extend? Are they going to do what they did with Van Dijk and Salah and let that contract run down into its final months or even days before a determination on his future is made. And outgoings are still important for Liverpool as well, because if they're to continue this incredible financing, they'll want to bring in one big fee, less because they're that concerned about PSR. And it should be noted that unlike many other clubs, Liverpool's financial year closed on May the 31st. So part of the reason why they were so aggressive in June is because they're into the next financial year. They're not delaying anything into July to get deals done. They close their financial year. They've got a lot of PSR headroom, so they can spend, but they won't want to inflate their squad size too high without a couple of outgoings first, which is perhaps why Quansah goes. Now they can focus on a defender. Darwin Núñez is expected to leave. Now they start to move for a number 9, but it would be misleading to paint that as bringing in money because they need it financially. The financial year's closed. They're already into 2025, 2026. They can keep spending if they want to, probably to the tune of another 200 million, but they won't want to make that squad size too big. And this is why I think it's those few incomings and excellent signings, then a couple of outgoings, and then we'll see a sort of second wave in Liverpool's recruitment.
Over to the blue part of Merseyside now. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, he's announced that he will leave Everton. This makes him a free agent. Have you heard any whispers about where he could be heading?
Yeah, Dominic Calvert-Lewin is a free agent, and wage is still a bit of an issue. We know that historically Newcastle United really liked that profile and tried in the past. They actually agreed a deal with Everton, but not with Calvert-Lewin, and the wage remains the same. So I'm not aware that Newcastle are going to revisit that deal, even though some would say they've lost out on João Pedro. They're unlikely to get Brian and Mbeumo, with Manchester United still confident. So even if Alexander Isak stays, perhaps Dominic Calvert-Lewin is the kind of player that would be a good fit at Newcastle, but the wage is still the wage, and even on a free transfer, therefore, I'm not so sure that Newcastle will break their wage structure in order to bring Calvert-Lewin in. You've got West Ham United, who could be one to watch as well. And then I'm told to keep an eye on Leverkusen as well, which would be a big surprise. But there may be a scenario with Leverkusen where we see a departure for Victor Boniface, who is high on the list of Al Nassr. And there's a bit of a domino effect going on at the moment where John Duran, who's only been half a season in Saudi Arabia, wants to leave. The expectation is that Al Nassr won't stand in his way. He's had a few options, but the big one is Fenerbahce, who are really pushing. If he exits, Al Nassr could come in for Boniface, a player that when they actually signed Duran, they had lined up as well, but they had to pick between one and the other. So Boniface actually did an Al Nassr medical, but was told wait, because they realised Duran might come off as well. And then right at the last minute, with both players ready to join, they decided to sign Duran. Now Duran's leaving. It could be that Al Nassr revisit Boniface, and therefore Leverkusen are looking to bring in another striker. And I am told to keep an eye on Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I have no information yet as to whether he'd be open to a move there or abroad, but that could be another club to watch.
You mentioned John Duran there. Where has this gone wrong in Saudi Arabia, as he only joined in January?
A lot of players perhaps get lured over to Saudi Arabia, and then when they're there, for whatever reasons, football or personal, decide that it's not for them. Duran is young, he's ambitious. Al Nassr haven't had the best of seasons. It can be a bit of a culture shock. I think Jordan Henderson found this moving mid-season and suddenly dealing with a different culture, different language, different infrastructure. And by that, I mean no disrespect, of course, to the Saudi Pro League. Everyone knows I go over there regularly to cover it for talkSPORT. It's a fantastic and emerging league, but it should be looked at in the same way as the Premier League in 92, 93. And it was probably only 2000 when the Premier League really became global. And I think this is how Saudi deal makers view their own league as well. It only started in this form in 2023. Is perhaps not really going to take off for 3 or 4 years. So you're in a foundational stage. And when you've been at a great club like Aston Villa with tremendous infrastructure and fans, a big stadium, Premier League football, and then you go from morning training to evening training, different kinds of dressing rooms, food, styles, climates, it can be very tough. And I know a big thing for a lot of players, as odd as it may sound, is just that switch due to climate and logistics. when you move from always getting up at 6 or 7 in the morning to going straight to training, to coming back, spend the afternoon with your friends and your family, and then games, of course, either in the afternoon or the evening. Saudi, it's completely inverted. You're at a relative loose end between 7 in the morning and probably 2 p.m. You might not leave for training until 5. Games kick off in the heat at 9. You might not be back home because of all the post-match commitments and travel and so on until 12 or 1. So you kind of go from a morning person to a night owl by default, and that can be tough on a player. And maybe it does take 6 months or even a year to fully acclimatise. And I think with Duran, it's just a case of really wanting to go and see it and play with Ronaldo. And he did okay on the field as well, we have to say. But then realising that as we head towards this World Cup year, Europe is the best place for him to return to.
And finally, it's been very quiet from Newcastle. They secured Antonio Cordero, an 18-year-old winger from Malaga. And that's it. They've been linked to so many names, but they seem to keep missing out. What's going on? And can we give Newcastle fans any good news?
Well, I think we can give them the good news that they're missing out on targets because they're being ambitious. So this is not a Newcastle United competing for most targets that we've heard against clubs mid-table of the Premier League or one club races that they've lost out on. This is Newcastle United going head-to-head with a variety of other big clubs. And I don't think we've really seen that with target on target on target. With Anthony Elanga, Forest just don't want to sell. They've got European football as well. Let's not forget. Okay, not Champions League, but enough to be quite bullish about that particular player. With Brian Bomo, they have been up against Manchester United and some say Spurs, but Mbeumo only wants Manchester United. And I think there's a pattern here in the calibre of players that Newcastle have tried for. They were face-to-face with Liam Delap, pitching another player they wanted to bring in. He joined Chelsea. So you could kind of argue in a very backhanded way, I know, it's a compliment to the fact that Newcastle United now are gunning for players going head-to-head against Big Six teams often and looking to spend and strengthen at Champions League quality. And when you elevate that level of target and cost involved, you're always going to have more competition. And there is unfortunately always a danger that they'll miss out. João Pedro was probably quite a sucker punch because Newcastle started it in May. Chelsea were not exploring a move in May. By mid-June, they were. And then suddenly Chelsea are able to get it done really quickly. And Newcastle United fans are probably thinking there felt a point when we were quite confident about this and maybe we were even the only ones in the race. And suddenly he's on a plane and he's going to be a Chelsea player in the next 24 to 48 hours. So that's disappointing. But the hope, I think, comes down to the fact that if you look at Delap, Pedro, Elanga, Mbeumo, all top targets, all proven Premier League quality, and a fair amount of money that's still there on the table that Newcastle would be prepared to spend. So I still think at the end of the summer, they'll spend that money, they'll bring in a couple, and there will be some really top signings that strengthen. And in addition to that, you have this ongoing saga of Alexander Isak. Some say Anthony Gordon, Arsenal considering him, even though it looks like Eberechi Eze is more feasible. There will be continued links, no doubt, with Bruno Guimaraes and Sven Botman. Manchester City tried for Tino Livramento, which was a very audacious swoop. And yet all these players are still at Newcastle United. And if they miss out on some of these Premier League proven targets, but are to keep all of those names, even though Liverpool haven't yet given up on Isak, Arsenal haven't yet decided Gordon is untouchable, but Newcastle's perspective is try your luck and we'll be the ones that reject. And this is why I think that Newcastle will still have these two core priorities. The first will be to say, if we keep all those players that I've just mentioned, they'll be in a situation where they're very happy with the foundations of their squad and can really push on and get back-to-back Champions League football, go far in that tournament next season and have another really strong campaign. And then the second thing is how can they elevate and improve and add? And that's the part that's been a bit harder, a bit slower, a bit more frustrating. But at the end of the window, I still expect at least a couple to come into Newcastle United. And when you look at the money they put down on the table, as I said before, for the players they've missed out on, that's still there. It shows you they're not in this tight PSR spot as they were 12 months ago. And that's why I expect Newcastle at the end of the window, even if there's some disappointment now, to still have a very productive summer.
Well, there you have it, Ben. Thank you so much for joining me. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the talkSPORT YouTube channel. Let us know your thoughts on all of that transfer news. And remember, the window will be back tomorrow to keep you up to date with the latest rumours, done deals, and everything in between.